Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. Quite a bit to cover today. Tomorrow is the runoff elections in Georgia, and I will be skipping an episode to do what I can to get people to the polls. I hope everyone listening will join me in whatever capacity you can. This is what this podcast and movement are all about. Shout out to our Tier 3 patrons Peter Park, Shay Meehan, and Nathan Stankowski, as well as all our other patrons. You help make all of this, and any good that comes of it, possible. If anyone out there wants to join these advocates of humanity first and independent journalism, head over to patreon.com/YangDaily. It would only take a couple bucks a month from each listener to keep this podcast and community going and growing. So we talked a lot yesterday about the attempts to overthrow the election results, and I know how convincing the voter fraud conspiracies can be to those uninformed on how the system works. Everyday Americans trying to critique election fraud rumors is like trying to critique quantum physics. We don't know enough to know how ignorant we are in such a field, which is why it's a good idea to listen to the election officials, experts, judges, and investigators, all of whom have rejected the faux evidence being offered up by conspiracy theorists. But if you want a collection of all the debunks for all the voter fraud claims, you can find it in Isaac Saul's Twitter thread in the links below. Definitely one to bookmark. There's also an article with an interview of him that's pretty interesting. Though for any specific allegation of fraud, you can also just Google it with fact check and find a debunk of it that way too, which I would highly advise you do before taking any of them too seriously. If anyone has a more accessible repository than Isaac's, please send me a link. I would love to see it. If we needed more evidence that conditional aid will never be the ideal solution to poverty, wrap your head around this. More than 1.2 million Americans are still waiting for their first unemployment check, and many have been waiting since March, according to a Washington Post analysis. This is due to countless complications in the bureaucracy of UI. Many applicants are asked for extensive proof of identity. Some are told to wait months to speak to a senior administrator. And of course, the agencies are completely overwhelmed by the unprecedented volume. And states had to implement the expanded Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program for gig and contract workers from scratch when they were already overwhelmed. Many states are still struggling to figure out what proof is acceptable to show a gig worker lost their job because of the pandemic, or whether a parent truly left a job to care for a child. The PUA is also extremely complicated since gig jobs produce fluctuating income and the unemployment aid typically is only used to replace about half of that. It's a mess. You know what would make it a whole lot easier? If we didn't care about proving they lost their job or what their income is. If it were a UBI that goes to everyone unconditionally. Meghan McCain apparently had a shocking revelation recently. After having a baby and experiencing medical problems that kept her away from her job for an extended period, she realized that paid maternity leave is actually important. She's now calling on conservatives to support it. Somehow she just wasn't able to grasp that it mattered until she experienced it herself. Unfortunately, Meghan is far from the only one in this boat. A large percentage of humans in general seem uninterested in anything that does not directly benefit them and struggle to grasp the value of things that only indirectly benefit them. This is a prime example of why universality is so important. Giving benefits to everyone puts support through the roof. This is just one of many reasons we need to universalize welfare spending with UBI. Scott was just discussing that and so much more on Jen Perelman's podcast. If you're like me, you never get tired of hearing Scott pitch the merits of UBI. Jen's audience is definitely heavily left-leaning, so it was good to get Scott on there to give a proper argument for why progressives should support unconditional cash aid, and how it creates a voluntary labor market, how it is a preventative measure against health, crime, inequality, and other issues, and so on. They also discussed Scott's thoughts on Yang's mayoral run, which I found interesting, the value of ranked choice voting and what role it will play in that run, and how being too purist or overly critical can ruin a movement. It was a really great conversation, and I'm glad her audience got to hear it. Jen continues to strike me as a fellow pragmatic progressive. From what I've heard, I think she will be a valuable leader. Check it out in the links. The UBI movement has reached a high school in Scott's backyard of New Orleans, where the Rooted School program is giving 10 seniors $50 a week over the course of a year for a total of $2,600. The program is funded by New Orleans-based education nonprofit 4.0 Schools, and the results will be analyzed by Stacia Martin West, director of the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Guaranteed Income Research. She says that what they're seeing so far is kids saving the money and planning for the future or helping out their families. One student used it to invest in a business opportunity, customizing phone cases, turning his 50 into 450. The goal of the program is simply to see what happens when young people are given unconditional cash, giving them more agency. They hope to dispel the myth that people, especially young people, will be frivolous with unconditional income. I look forward to the results. A lot of UBI advocates have been conducting a hunger strike in support of basic income. They're now on the 24th day. While I personally favor forms of protest that affect those in power, protests like these can help unite and strengthen the resolve of supporters and demonstrate determination. If you want to join in, post to social media with the hashtag #HungerStrikeForUBI. There's also a UK petition for an emergency UBI to help people ride out the pandemic. If you live in the UK, definitely follow the link below and add your name. Reverend Wendy Hamilton, DC's burgeoning congresswoman and longtime Yanganger, will be presenting the moral case for UBI via Zoom to the DC UBI Coalition on Thursday, January 21st. You can register at the link below to tune in or participate. Finally, I highly recommend listening to the most recent Yang Speaks episode with Ossoff and Warnock. Ossoff continues to impress me as a speaker and an advocate of the right policies. He makes clear that he and Warnock intend to effect real change if they win these races, reestablishing the Voting Rights Act, spearheading an investment in green infrastructure, and getting direct cash relief to the American people. Everything I hear bolsters my respect for them further, and the entire Democratic Party seems to have coalesced around the message of cash relief as well. Biden's speech today centered on winning Georgia so we could pass those $2,000 checks. The ads are explicitly staking out that issue and the divide between the GOP and the Dems on it. It's wonderful to see. Though it may be opportunistic support right now, that's how politics goes. Think back to a year ago when no Democrat outside of the presidential primary spoke of unconditional income. We are seeing the Democratic Party turning into the party of UBI bit by bit before our eyes, and it is beautiful. But it will be for naught if McConnell shuts down every attempt to enact it. We need these guys in office, and we need the Senate to get off the bleachers and start working for citizens again. Please join me in doing whatever you can tomorrow to secure these runoffs in Georgia, gang. There is so much that needs doing, and so much that we can get done if we can secure this first crucial step forward. The future is in our hands. Let's run with it. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Please join me on the phones or on the streets to help voters get to the polls. Bookmark and share the voter fraud debunking thread, the UI article, the UBI for Seniors trial, and the UK UBI petition. Don't forget to put in your half hour a day of phone banking or text banking to support the efforts in Georgia. If you need help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, the Mission Asset Fund, or United Way. And don't forget to Yang Daily.